So at last, the regular season is here. It begins this week for the Seahawks and the Mike McDonald era against the Broncos this weekend. First of all, fantastic news that the team has announced they're going to be wearing the throwback jerseys this weekend. I've just got a feeling that ownership at the moment know that these are very popular. I think they actually prefer the throwback uniform. And I think the fact that they're doing this in week one, it's just been a surprise announcement this week, is indicative of a preference to change towards more of a, I don't know if it's to this throwback uniform specifically full time or to redo the uniforms in the future to go to this kind of style. I think they're going to do that. I think what we're going to find is that the throwbacks are going to become the permanents. We're going to have a road jersey combo that goes to the throwbacks. And what they will have is, instead of the action green, they will have a navy uniform as kind of like an alternative that they will wear maybe a couple of times a season. So I'm really happy about the fact that throwbacks are back this weekend. I think they're the best uniforms in the NFL. I want to see them back full time. Really good to see that. But what I want to do today is I want to run through my thoughts on the NFC West and my predictions for each of the teams and how it all relates to the Seahawks. So I'm going to start with the 49ers, the defending NFC West champions, the defending NFC champions. I want to run through pros and cons for each team and give you a thought as to why I believe what I believe about each team. What are the pros of the 49ers? Kyle Shanahan, right off the bat, one of the best coaches in the league, an offensive genius. His schemes for so long have produced offense. I think it's a big plus for them. Nick Bosa is clearly a positive. Still one of the best defensive players, one of the best overall players in the NFL. He is a game wrecker. He is fantastic. While ever he's healthy, he's going to cause you problems from the defensive line. The 49ers have the most blue chip players in the division. That's absolutely clear. It's indisputable that the Niners have got more blue chip players than the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. And I also think that even if the Niners have a difficult season, which is I'm going to come on to, I think they possibly will do, I still think that their base level, like their floor, is still going to be pretty good. That they're going to have a base level of wins, which for most teams would still be a very good season. I don't think we're going to see them completely collapse, let's put it that way, but they might not be as good as something. What are the cons for the Niners? They don't have Eric Armstead anymore, and on top of the fact that they traded DeForest Buckner away not that long ago, they have gone from having a terrifying defensive line full of loaded blue chip players to relying a lot on Nick Bosa. Now, he's not the only player. Hargrave's still going to be in there in the middle. No one's saying that it's a bad defensive line now. It's just that when you lose Eric Armstead off the back of already losing DeForest Buckner, this is not the same defensive line that was terrorizing the NFC West a few years ago. Dre Greenlaw's really unfortunate injury in the last Super Bowl is going to hamper him this year. The Trent Williams holdout. Now, he has shown in the past with Washington that he will hold out for a whole season to get his own way. And he's clearly not happy. He has seen now Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey get big paydays this year, and he thinks he deserves, and he's probably quite right, he is one of their top players, possibly their second best player after Nick Bosa. The Niners rely on Trent Williams. If they cannot get something sorted with him, and as of the recording of this video, they haven't, then that's going to be an issue for them. And I don't think this is, people have said, well, it's like Walter Jones, he'll be back at the weekend. I don't know. Trent Williams, like I say, did this at Washington and took it right through to the end. Can the Niners just keep going? How many years can you get to the NFC Championship, get to a Super Bowl, and not actually win a Super Bowl, and then keep coming back and doing it again and again and again? Eventually, there's going to be a season where it just catches up with them a little bit, and they've played more football than a lot of other teams over the years. It's going to catch up with them. Is it going to be this year? Who knows? It might not be this year. But there is going to come a point where they just can't keep doing this over and over again, getting close, coming back. There's very few examples of teams doing that, apart from the ones that obviously have the elite quarterbacks who can just sort of rely on the passing game to get them through. Brock Purdy in a contract year is going to be very, very interesting because this is not a first-round pick like a Trevor Lawrence, who's already got a lot of money and is a very wealthy man and is looking for the second contract. This is a man who was the last pick in the NFL draft, who will have made some money, and made no mistake about that over the last couple of years, but he's not had that big life-changing contract yet. And he will want to max that out. And how he handles that pressure, and will he push things to try and elevate his performance and his stats? Who knows? Is it going to change him anyway? It might not. it might change him for a couple of weeks, and then Kyle Shanahan sort of collars him and says, stop doing that, and he rectifies things. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how Brock Purdy handles contract here. And then the other one is Ricky Pearsall. Just everybody hopes that it sounds like positive news that he's going to make a full recovery, and we can all hope for that. But it's not ideal that they've had this drama right before the season beginning with him getting shot, and that when is he going to be available to play in the NFL? Who knows? So my overall thought on the Niners, they are rightly favourites for the NFC West and probably should be until they've been knocked off the perch once and for all. And that hasn't happened yet. They have great players. They have an amazing coach. But there have been issues this offseason, and some of them are unresolved. There has been a lot of drama. There's been a lot of distraction. There's been players not doing anything at training camp. They've had some injury issues or some health issues. Is Deebo Samuel what he used to be? A player's going to start getting older. That's probably another thing we could put on the cons. George Kittle's not getting any younger. I just wonder whether I understand why, the betting companies have put them where they are for the win-loss, why people sort of expect them to do very, very well again. I would also agree with all of that if I was going to make a prediction, but I also think they are a prime team to underachieve based on expectation. And I am not convinced that they are the obvious champions-elect of the NFC West. I think there is a chance they could regress. And there's also a chance they could still romp the NFC West and be the best team in the NFC. Not denying that at all. I just think there's been a lot going on this offseason, a lot to handle. I've not even mentioned the fact that they've had to change defensive coordinators because last year the defense wasn't very good. It might be a positive thing, but bringing in Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley, I don't know if that's a cure for those ills. So we will see. On to the Rams. Pros, obviously Sean McVay, genius. As with Kyle Shanahan, two fantastic proven coaches. He's won a Super Bowl. Sean McVay, a top coach. One of the best, if not the best. Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp is a great trio. And on offense, they will move the ball in most games. They've added young talent in the draft. I think particularly the two Florida State defensive linemen, I liked both. So I'm interested to see how they will come in and perform. Not a long list of pros, though. Cons, no Aaron Donald. It doesn't matter that he was getting older. It doesn't matter that he flirted with retirement for a few years. Losing Aaron Donald is a huge deal for the Rams. They traded their best linebacker away, and there's now a lot of pressure on a lot of younger players who are not Aaron Donald to protect that second level of the defense. And I'm not sure it's there. I wonder if they're going to get run on a bit this year. The offensive line changes at the last minute are weird. So they want to move Avia over to center. They then sign Jonah Jackson to a massive contract from Detroit. Now at the last minute, they're deciding Avia needs to stay at guard and Jackson needs to move to center. He's never played there before. I don't understand that. I don't understand the chopping and changing there. I don't understand why they haven't got a center and why they've essentially splashed out on three guards. It doesn't make any sense to me. So we'll see how that goes. Because Matt Stafford, brilliant quarterback, but has got beaten up a lot, does get injuries. Is he going to be well protected? That if the answer is no, if he's not probably going to be protected, then this could be a long season for him. And if they lose Stafford, then it's good night, Vienna. Lost Raheem Morris, and how is that going to play out? And they won a lot of close games last year, and you could say, well, that's a positive. They've got something about them. They've got that ability to finish. But this is kind of, I'm just going to sort of move this and segue onto my overall thought with the Rams. I think they're overrated. I think last year they were lucky to make the playoffs. And they should have lost to the Seahawks. I mean, it was a stupid performance by the Seahawks. It was classically, I hate to say it, but it was classically sort of latter-day Carol in that Seattle should have won that game. They cocked it up. They lost by a point. And as a consequence, the Rams, instead of being 3-7 and in a real hole, having lost 4 games in a row, they are backing it at 4-6. They then beat the Cardinals. They beat the Browns. They're 6-6. They finish off the season with a bit of a flourish. But you just look at their wins. They won 10 games. That included a win against the Seahawks in week 1. That was just a mess of a game from the Seahawks. An embarrassingly bad performance by the Seahawks, where they admitted that the Rams wanted it more after the game and they just looked totally unprepared. That's completely on the coaching staff and on Pete Carroll, the head coach. It was embarrassing and they were battered. I don't think they'll get that luxury in Seattle this year. They needed overtime to beat the Colts. I think Anthony Richardson started that game, but perhaps didn't finish it. They beat the Cardinals at home when the Cardinals started in a rough way. They beat the Seahawks by a point, beat the Cardinals again, beat the Browns, who were on to their third or fourth quarterback at this point and, had that issue. Beat the Commanders by a score, beat the Saints by a score, beat the Giants by a point, and they beat the San Francisco 49ers backups by a point. They could easily have been, let's say, a 7-10 team last year. And this idea that they were brilliant and it's 10 win, it feels very much as if in the same way that people were congratulating the Seahawks sometimes for their playoff qualification under Carroll in the end, such as the 2022 season. They just don't feel like a massive threat to me. They're capable because of McVay and because of Stafford and because of Nakua and of Cup of beating anybody. I just think they're a bit overrated. And I think, they had a fair bit of fortune at times last year. They've now lost Aaron Donald, who still had, I think, 10 sacks and bajillion hits and pressures last year. And I think taking Donald out of that team is going to have a bigger impact than people are thinking at the minute. And I don't think they're going to do as well as people are predicting at the moment. But then again, I might be proven completely wrong betting against Sean McVay, who is, as I mentioned, a genius. Then the Cardinals, before we go on to the Seahawks. Pros, I think Kyler Murray has now become underrated. I think people have just soured so much on him in a needless way that he is now viewed in a too negative a way by NFL fans. This is still a player with a great arm who's very creative, who can hurt you in any week and can beat you with his legs and his arm. And he has a fantastic arm. And now he gets to throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. to go with Wilson and McBride and at least a trio of good receivers to throw to there. The coaches did better than everyone expected last year, which is a positive for them. Everyone was expecting this coaching staff to crash and burn. The offensive coordinator is already being touted for head coaching interviews next year because of the work he did in year 1. And they will give teams a game. I think we've seen that. They lost games last year, but were still more competitive than people expected. Cons, I don't see difference makers on the defense. I don't see a game-wrecking defensive lineman. And they have some reasonably good players on defense, but I don't see a massive game-changing player. Can they be consistent? I've got question marks there. And I just think overall, I think they've done a good job adding talent, but I still think they lack overall talent. They're probably another draft away from taking a significant step forward. Now, the Cardinals get a lot of good press, and people sort of talk them up a little bit. It's easy to forget that they only won 4 games last year. The reason that Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the roster is because they were so bad that they ended up picking 4th overall. Their wins were against the Dallas Cowboys, which was a surprise, indicative of Dallas, I think, more than anything else. Beat a crappy Falcons team by 2 points. They beat the Steelers, who were in quarterback hell. And they beat a slumping Eagles in a shootout when the Eagles were really bad at that point. Yes, they had some they should have beaten the Seahawks in week 18 and they chucked that one away. They almost beat the Texans. That, shows well for them. They only lost by a touchdown at home to the Ravens. They had some good, like I say, some good competitive wins. Only lost to the Giants by 3, only lost to the Commanders by 4. But they also got pulverized by the Browns. So I think they've ended up becoming a bit trendy and a bit overrated simply because people expected the coaching staff to be awful and they expected the team to be awful, and they weren't as awful as people think. So as a consequence, people have overrated them this year. I don't think they'll be that much better. I can see them being a bit better, especially if Harrison hits the ground running and builds instant chemistry with Kyler Murray, and if Kyler Murray stays healthy. But I would still think 6 wins feels a fair projection. And then the Seahawks. Pros, they will be better schemed on both sides of the ball this year. I feel pretty confident of saying that. I am not an X's and O's expert, but I was absolutely irritated beyond belief watching the defense for the last few years, especially the way they defended the run. And I think they're going to be better coached on defense now. I just do. I think they will take a big step forward there with Mike Macdonald. And then offensively, I believe in Ryan Grubb. And I think the games last year where we could see the Seahawks could barely gain a yard in the second half of certain games, I think those days will be long gone. So I think the coaching changes will help. I think they will help in terms of developing talent. The Seahawks have done a good job, thanks to the Russell Wilson trade, of bringing in a lot of young players with talent. And they really only scratched the surface of that talent in the last 2 seasons. Now, I think we've already seen with Derek Hall in preseason, the young players are ready to take a step forward with this staff. I think the D-line is very good. Losing your Chenna and Wosu is a blow. But with Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Jaron Reed in the interior and Jonathan Hankins as a nose tackle, and with Maffei and Hall and Wosu when he comes back, I think the Seahawks have got what it takes to cause some issues up front. And they've got some rotational depth that can come in and do a good job. I think the defensive line is a big plus. And I think it meshes nicely with the defensive backs, especially Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, 2 cornerbacks, who I think will have excellent seasons. The offense has talent. Now, there are going to be question marks that we're going to get onto with the offense. But as was the case last year, they have almost an embarrassment of riches in terms of weapons. DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, Jake Bobo at receiver, all very good players. Noah Fant is a good tight end, and I think the depth they have behind him, there will be players such as Brady Russell who I think surprise people this year and contribute more than maybe others expect outside of Seattle and haven't watched preseason. You have 2 good young running backs, let's say 3. I think Kenny McIntosh is a good player. So you've got a lot of good weapons, and I am not one of these people who goes over the top talking about Geno Smith, and I do think some people do go over the top, but I do think he has the potential to have a very good year under Ryan Grubb. So I think there is potential on offense as well. And they won 9 games in each of the last 2 years with a crap defense. It was 28th per DVOA last year. Now, if you can win 9 games with that defense playing the way that they did against the Steelers, I believe you can win more than 9 games this year. So the Ravens under Mike Macdonald, he inherited, it's a massive coincidence, the 28th ranked defense. He took them to the 8th ranked defense in his first season and then the 1st in his second. Whether the Seahawks will be the 1st ranked defense in 2025, I don't know. But I do think there's a chance he could take them from 28th to about 8th to 12th. And that will be enough to, at the very least, get them back to 9 wins, I think. Probably get them above 9 wins. Cons, the offensive line. Huge question marks across the board. Charles Cross, big year for him in year 3. He has to take a step forward. Is Lake Tomlinson good enough at left guard? Is Connor Williams even healthy enough to play at center? Is the right guard situation, the fact that it's a big mystery as to who's going to play there, Anthony Bradford or Christian Haynes, to me, is a bit concerning. And I think you look at the obvious signs of this can be Bradford because he started in the final preseason game. But I think it's almost a case of if you've got 2 right guards, you've kind of got none. Abe Lucas is not back, and George Fant, I think, is a competent fill-in. But, you'd ideally have Abe Lucas back and ready to go. O-line will be a massive question mark. I do believe in Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb's coaching, but that could let them down in terms of the run and the pass. Rookie coaches, Mike Macdonald's never done this. Adam Dirty's never been a defensive coordinator before. Ryan Grubb's never been an offensive coordinator before in the NFL. It's a very new, the special teams coach, Jay Harbaugh's never been a special teams coordinator before. So they're in the NFL. So there's a newness there, and I suspect that that will lead to some growing pains and that things will not be perfect. And then, sorry, Geno lovers, I'm going to bring this up. Can Geno Smith play a full season consistently? That doesn't mean playing every game amazingly well. No one should expect that, even of Patrick Mahomes. But I've probably been the only person talking about the fact that his 3 most significant seasons in his career, his final year at West Virginia and his 2 seasons starting in Seattle, have involved almost like exactly a half season of very good play and a half season of quite poor play. And it's like, it's almost better to have of the 17 games, play well in 13 and have 4 where maybe one of them you play really bad, one you just play okay, one you're playing kind of somewhere between bad and average, and one way you just kind of, I don't know, nondescript or whatever. Like, nobody expects like a full slate of amazing performances, but you can't have extended runs of bad games. And people like to make excuses and say, well, it was the offensive line and stuff like that. And to some extent, I think especially like the Cincinnati game, and I think Jeff Simmons has done a good job breaking this down, when they were giving up all those pressures to Sam Hubbard on the right-hand side when the tackle was out, that you can point a finger and say that is a big reason why. But do you know what? The best quarterbacks face adversity. They face issues like a bad offensive line, and they find a way to fight through it. And in those 3 seasons that I've listed, there have been extended pieces of play where Geno has not been very good. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that he didn't hit any of his escalators last year. And he needs to have a better year in terms of consistency, I think, in order to be talked about in the way that some people talk about. And at least going into the season, it's not a massive con, but I would, for example, have a lot more faith in Matt Stafford with Sean McVay than I would with Geno Smith and Ryan Grubb right now. But I'm not expecting Geno to be bad. I'm just asking for consistency. I actually am very optimistic about the way that Geno Smith is going to play in this offense, but I'm just, it has to be some cons on the list. So there we go. I think they are primed, the Seahawks, to have a very good season. And now, if there are other fans of the NFC West who don't read Seahawks Draft Blog and don't watch this channel that often, they'll be going, Homer alert, you're just saying nice things about the Seahawks and not being negative about them. What you're talking about. Well, in fairness, I've done pros and cons for each team. I think everything's been fair. And you only have to ask people. There's a lot of people on the internet who are very keen to tell you how I'm the biggest hater in the world when it comes to the Seahawks. That's not true. I just like to think that I'm pretty balanced and I say what I think. And sometimes that's not positive. And for the most part, I've been proven right on a lot of things over the years. Not everything, but most things have been proven to have some semblance of a few nuggets of truth along the way in terms of some of these so-called negative opinions that I've had. I'm very positive about the Seahawks right now. I think they can. I'll just say it. My prediction is I do think the Seahawks will have a very good chance to win the NFC West. I think because the Niners, like I said, will have a base number of wins, which even at their floor will still be, I think will get them in the hunt for the NFC West. And my prediction is that by the end of the season, it will be a closely run thing between the Niners and the Seahawks as to who wins this division. The Rams may be in the race for a bit, but I think by the end of the year, it will be Niners or Seahawks who win this division. I think the Seahawks have got a lot of young talent. I think the coaching changes are going to be a massive positive. I think we're going to see players take a big step forward under this staff, such as, yes, Geno Smith. Yes, DK Metcalf. Jackson Smith in Jigba. I think we're going to see the tight ends more effective. I think we're going to see the running backs more effective. I think we're going to see the defensive line look really good. We are going to see consistent pressure, more sacks, more turnovers than we've seen for the last few years. And I think all of the evidence there is that is the case. I think when you look now that with the Niners losing Eric Armstead and the Rams losing Aaron Donald, the Seahawks do not have a Nick Bosa level pass rusher, but with the depth that they have, with the youth that they have on the edges, with Byron Murphy playing alongside Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, and Jonathan Hankins, you can make an argument that by the end of this season, we might be saying that the Seahawks have the most rounded defensive line in the NFC West. And boy, have I been waiting many years to make a statement like that. And they have got to make improvements on their offensive line if they're ever going to reach their potential. But you can't fix everything in a year. That is for the next offseason, in my opinion. And the more that I watch this draft class, the more there will be opportunities to draft defensive linemen who can come and help the Seahawks in the 2025 draft. I think there's every chance of that happening. When I look at the other teams, there are going to be question marks about the 49ers offensive line as well, especially if Trent Williams doesn't come back. We've talked about the issues with the Rams currently changing which guard they want to play at center. The Arizona Cardinals have spent a lot on their offensive line. I happen to think that they might actually take a step forward on their offensive line, but I don't think the defensive line is as good as, let's say, the Seahawks and their first round pick that they took at the D-line. I think he's going to start the season with an injury. So I think there are lots of reasons to be optimistic. I think Mike McDonald was the right pick for the Seahawks. I think that John Schneider actually has been proven completely justified in everything that he has done. And I think that Mike McDonald will lead this team to a massive improvement defensively. And as I've been saying, if this team can win 9 games with the 28th ranked defense per DVOA, what can they do if they can have if the 10th best defense per DVOA? Like, there is a chance to actually add a few more wins there. And when I look at the schedule, yes, there are some challenging games. And yes, they play in the NFC West, which is a really difficult division. But I still think that this is an easier schedule than it was. There's not the gauntlet in the middle of the season that they had last year. And I think that even if there was, they'd be better prepared for it. I also think that the Seahawks will probably lose at least one game that has us all with a head in our hands, thinking, how on earth have they lost to this team? Pick one of the weaker teams on the schedule. They'll probably lose one of those games. Do you know why? Because they've got rookie head coach, rookie defensive coordinator, rookie offensive coordinator. There's going to be a mistake. Heck, they might even lose this weekend to Sean Payton and the Broncos, and we go, how on earth did that happen? But you know what? Don't panic if that happens, because it is year one of a completely new era. And I don't think it's important for the Seahawks to win the division this year, but I think they are going to be pushing and challenging for it. I do think they're going to make the playoffs. I do think the Rams are a bit overrated. I think the Cardinals are a bit overrated. I think the Niners have had a very, very difficult offseason, and it could impact them, plus all the other issues. But I also think they've got by far the most blue chip talent on their roster in the division, and therefore it will enable them to be very, very competitive. Those are my thoughts. I am very positive about the Seahawks going into this season and cannot wait for week 1. And you, like I say, the people who watch me regularly, the people who visit Seahawks Draft Blog regularly, know that I don't just say these things for the sake of being positive. It would do my views and my subscriptions and everything else that comes with that, the power of good, to just come on and tell you everything is awesome all the time. But I'm never going to do that. But right now, I'm going to tell you that I'm very positive about the Seahawks this season. Bring on week 1. Check out Seahawks Draft Blog. There is a huge article reviewing week 1 of college football on there now, 3,500 words, reviewing everything that I watched on Saturday. I am going to go and properly study USC against LSU right now after I've done this video to give you some thoughts on that later in the week. I will probably do a video on all of the draft stuff as well. But in the meantime, go and check the article out, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Hit the like button. Leave me a comment, giving your prediction, giving your thoughts on everything that I've had to say in this video as well. Make sure you subscribe for the new season. Don't forget all the live streams and everything else that's coming up. We'll be back for that. Until then, bye for now.